Comic Book Logic.
To, I guess, the resurgence of comic book logic, so to speak. We're taking a little bit of a different turn now. We're going to start talking about the Marvel movies, the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
MCU.
Yeah. It sounds like MCU sounds like a rap group from the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, like MC5, like they became something completely different. I don't know.
Yeah, but now the latest single from Baltimore is MCU.
Iron Man.
Iron Man.
All right, so yeah, actually today we're going to be talking about Iron Man. Now this is going to be a little more structured like this, so we're actually going to start off this cast by just giving a little bit of background. I'm Joe. I'm the comic book guy. And with me is...
I'm Kevin. I am the movie guy, I guess.
Yes, so to speak. Now, Kevin likes to be like, I'm not really that into movies. He sat there and just sat and watched every Robert Altman movie, and no one made him do that. So...
I am a movie guy, and I am a movie guy in the sense of I love a lot of different kinds of movies, probably more than most people. And I'm not saying that to brag. It's a detriment, unfortunately, because it means that my watch list of movies is always astronomically long, and I will never see even 10% of the movies that I supposedly want to see. But in relation to comic book movies, I watch them, and because I watch all of the movies, and most of them are fine. But this podcast came out of many conversations that we've had about my reservations with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, about the marketing aspect of just lots of things, and lots of things that we'll get to and resolve, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I mean, this first one's going to be a little different because this is the beginning of everything, so we don't have the whole Marvel, the build up to it, so to speak. This is the first one, and so just before we start with Iron Man, so to speak, I want to ask Kevin, going into the movie Iron Man, I know you've seen these movies before.
I've seen it before. I've seen just about all of them.
But when before you even saw Iron Man, what did you know about him? Like, what did you know about
the character?
About the character,
nothing whatsoever.
Nothing whatsoever. You knew? Did you know he was a guy in a suit?
Yes, I knew that there was a guy in a suit. I did know that. I don't know how I knew that. Wouldn't have known Tony Stark, wouldn't have known any of the background, no sense of what his powers are, so to speak. The bulk of my non-Batman or Superman, which I also mostly know from the movies, the bulk of, let's just say my Marvel knowledge of any characters came from various Saturday morning and or weekday afternoon cartoons. Yeah. Knew a lot about the X-Men as they were presented on the X-Men cartoon from the 90s. Knew a lot about Spider-Man as he was presented from the Spider-Man cartoon from the 90s.
What about the 60s one with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends?
I don't know that I've ever seen that Spider-Man, the meme-friendly version of Spider-Man. Do know a lot about the old school Super Friends, though. Did watch a lot of that.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
The Justice League inexplicably being called Super Friends. I'm sure you can explain to me why that is, but that is probably not a conversation for right now.
Because they had superpowers, and they were friends.
Dumb question. No, I didn't know. I don't think that I could have told you anything about Iron Man whatsoever, and I think that's... Well, you're probably gonna get to that point.
I'm gonna give you a little bit of the background on Iron Man before the movie, so to speak.
Right.
So.
Well, and that's what made it so interesting, I think, for Marvel to start there.
Yeah.
That people don't know anything about Iron Man.
Yeah. I mean, so of course Iron Man debuted in 1963. So way, way, way long ago. So before the movie came out in 2008, the character was already pretty much 40 years old at that time. Created, of course, by the indomitable Stan Lee, who did you catch his cameo in the movie?
When he was called Hugh Hefner?
Yeah,
yes.
we will.
It was Stan Lee as Hugh Hefner?
Which is actually kind of funny because Stan Lee, when creating Iron Man, I wanted him to be a Howard Hughes type character. Like a millionaire playboy,
Sure.
little eccentric, an arms dealer, so to speak, like he is in the movie. His own quote is, "I think I gave myself a dare. In the height of the Cold War, the young readers, if there was any, they hated. It was war, it was the military. So I got a hero who represented that to the 100th degree."
The 100th degree. Wow.
Yeah,
All right.
He's a weapons manufacturer. He was providing weapons for the army. He was rich. He was an industrialist. That he is like, and he became popular. So there, yeah. So the original 1963 Iron Man was wounded in Vietnam.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was topical at the time.
Sure.
He was on the pulse of,
Yes.
of what was going on. And a lot of things were pretty
Neil
much
Young wrote a song about it.
in the alternative universe
in the MCU or the Marvel comic book universe.
Yes. So in 1963, he was in Vietnam, and a lot of things that are in the movie were also in the comic. He gets captured. He takes shrapnel to the chest. He meets the doctor Yin. What's his name? Yin something. I always remember him as Yin.
Yeah. And
Yin Sane, I think it is.
We just saw it, and I don't remember.
Yeah. He meets him, and he helps develop the Iron Man armor. And he comes out of it a changed man. He wants to use the armor to protect people. So that's pretty much all the way there. And it's been updated over the time. In the 90s, it was changed to the first Gulf War. And now it's in the modern, it's Afghanistan or the second Gulf War. Yin Sen. Okay, Ho Yin Sen was the guy's name.
Ah.
Yeah. And almost all Stark and Yin Sen build the armor together. The weird thing is that Obadiah Stane also been around in the comic book universe for very long. Very, very different than the version we see in the movie, and I'm not going to spend too long on it. Also called the Ironmonger. Definitely not played by Jeff Bridges in the comic book.
Oh, well.
Oh.
Jeff Daniels, maybe?
Yes, Jeff Daniels from Dumb and Dumber in the Newsroom.
Yeah, young Jeff Daniels.
In the comic book, however, one of the most probably pervasive things throughout Iron Man's history is he has a very addictive personality. He's an alcoholic in many of the storylines that transfers over to drugs and others. So he has a very, very addictive personality through drugs, sex, alcohol, all that sort of thing. That's kind of been a common theme throughout it. And I think it's weird that...
Shrapnel,
yeah.
Dangerous shrapnel.
Yeah.
Addiction.
Marvel really doesn't touch, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, doesn't touch on that too much, like in terms of it being a character flaw as it does in the comic. But the movie does touch on it a little bit, his addictive personality, which is part of the reason I think that, why we have Robert Downey Jr. playing the character.
Sure.
So we start off with the sweet dulcet tones of AC/DC. Now we're going to give a little bit of this is the part of the show where we're going to give a little bit of a recap of the movie, kind of just giving our thoughts as we go through it. Nothing too out of the ordinary, I think.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so the movie starts off in Arabistan. I don't know necessarily where it is. It's a nondescript
desert caves,
country,
brown people who don't like America.
And that was one of my biggest problems is like these are a lot of character actors I recognized, and none of them are actually like Afghani or anything like that. Like, that guy's Egyptian. Wait, that guy's Pakistani. This doesn't make any sense.
Oh, we can't tell. We have no idea. Yeah. We don't keep up with that.
That's what I'm saying.
You're brown. You're
yeah.
hired.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was throughout the entire thing. But he's driving. Tony Stark is in a Humvee, guarded by soldiers, driving through Arabistan.
Makes a reference to MySpace.
He does make that. This is 2008 too.
Were we ever so young?
But I mean, MySpace was not around in 2008.
Well,
I mean, it was, but it wasn't like
but
no one was using it in 2008.
Might have been filmed, and that line might have been written and spoken in 2007.
Yeah, but I mean, it's weird because I was married in 2008 and I had my Facebook account way before then. So that's why it's a little interesting to me.
Wow.
Maybe when it was written, MySpace was still the top dog.
He was busy and he wasn't quite caught up.
Yeah,
I think
true.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah, so he's driving through there and he's got the soldiers, of course, and the soldiers and he's being straight up Robert Downey Jr. I don't think.
Oh yeah.
The hardest part of this movie for me is separating the character of Tony Stark from Robert Downey Jr. because in some ways they've become way intertangled.
Sure.
In that universe. But anyway, the caravan he's currently in Arabistan gets under attack through, RPG fire, machine gun fire, and all of the people that he's made friends with in the Humvee end up dying in horrible, excruciating deaths.
Yeah.
And he gets out and he's struggling, he pulls out his flip phone to text someone, I guess.
He pulls out his Motorola Razr.
Yeah. And he's almost killed by irony. No, it's an RPG rocket that says Stark Industries on
Sure.
it.
Yes.
Of course, then he's taken capture, put in, standard what Americans think is going on over in the Middle East. Take it to a cave with a bag on his head. And they're like,
video is made.
Yeah, video is made.
Released on MySpace.
MySpace Music, actually. Uploaded
to LimeWire and distributed to colleges across the nation.
On Napster. Do you see his video on Napster of Tony Stark? Yeah, he ends up... but they end up wanting... so then we flash back at that point,
yes.
after the RPG attack.
How did we get there?
And we go back, and he's at a Vegas casino.
Still being Robert Downey Jr.
However, they give us all the exposition in a flashback format with bad Photoshop magazine covers.
Which I loved. I thought, let's get this out of the way, because Marvel understands that we've got they have an end game.
Yeah.
But before they can even talk about what that end game is, they've got to get people on board with this character who, I think in my mind, maybe they didn't realize just how much, but they knew how central he was going to be to the next however many years.
Well, I mean, more than that, I think Marvel understands something that DC will never understand. It's that superhero origins are pretty much in the zeitgeist of American culture. Mm-hmm. We don't need to know too much.
Yeah.
But we know that...
We didn't need him to become Iron Man an hour and a half into this movie. We needed him to become Iron Man like 20 minutes in, if possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's even that, it's like, we don't... That's the biggest problem that Batman Begins and Man of Steel suffer from, is the fact that it takes so long for these people to become these characters that we want to see on the screen. Iron Man's a little different, though, because I think the movie could have been called Tony Stark, and I think I still would have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all rests on Robert Downey Jr.'s shoulders throughout this entire movie, but it's just we don't need to know all this stuff. We don't need to see like this long, laborious, tortured idea of how he becomes.
We just
Iron
needed
Man.
30 seconds of a little video of his father in the business,
Howard
and Stark
Stark,
Industries,
you know.
Yeah, and then cut to who he actually is. There it is. Everything we needed to know was in that,
he
that
goes up,
intro.
They
and
present
then...
they present the award, and he's not there. He's gambling in the casino. Which, let me tell you, by the way, one of the notes I took is they will never, ever, ever let you blow on dice at a casino, especially when you're playing craps.
Even if
the dice always have to remain in sight.
Even
you
if you're
roll it,
Tony Stark.
Yeah, they don't let you blow on those dice.
No.
Maybe if you're Tony Stark and you got millions of dollars on the table, but most of the time they will not let. If you try to pull that stunt, they will cap you. They will kneecap you right there.
They will shoot you with a Stark Industries Jericho missile.
Yeah,
right
much.
there in the casino.
And of course, there's Terrence Howard,
wife-beaten Terrence Howard.
What was that movie he was in? We're Hard Out Here for a Pimp. What's the one?
Oh, with oh my God! Why do I keep wanting to say Showgirls?
Burlesque. He was in Burlesque.
What is that movie?
We'll find out
I
eventually.
don't know. It doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter, but
No.
Terrence Howard is there. He's playing.
He has not transformed into Don Cheadle yet.
No, he's not. He's Rhodey Rhodes. Iron Man's, I guess, military contractor. They're really kind of nebulous about what he does in the movie, but I guess he
shows up at the right time in all of the right places. He shows up to rescue him.
He's the military liaison, is what he is, essentially, to Stark Industries, Tony Stark's company that sells weapons to the military.
Sure.
Yeah. Instead of Tony Stark accepting the award, it's accepted by the man who was previously in charge of Stark Industries, Obadiah Stane, played by a very non-menacing, bald,
Hustle and Flow.
Hustle and Flow, thank you. Jeff Bridges, who's, pretty good in the movie. I mean,
yeah,
I don't find him menacing at all. I never find him as a villain.
No.
I mean, even when he's like a badass, like he's in what's the not No Country for Old Men, but what's the Coen brother True Grit. When he's in True Grit, I never found him that menacing. I always find him more grandfatherly, or fatherly rather than an insane megalomaniac, which I guess is good for the movie because you're not technically supposed to know he's the villain.
Yeah.
Unless you're, of course, a person like me who knows who Obadiah Stane is.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is getting too ahead of ourselves, but that was sort of one of the issues. It was fine, but I feel like it handicapped the movie a little bit because ultimately you find out that not only is he the villain, there's no gray area to his. He's just evil, greedy capitalist. No empathy. I'm trying to think of exactly what I wanted to say. The cat smacking kind of a day. He didn't really smack his cat. For those listening, there's no animal abuse. I was witness. We can cut that out. There was no gray area. There was no misinterpreting. There was no sympathizing with his motives. Like, well, he's kind of got a point. It was just like he's a cartoonish,
he's
villain.
evil.
He's just the bad guy. And then once he becomes a robot or puts his version of the suit on,
that's Ironmonger suit. Yeah.
Then he just sort of stomps around. His voice gets even more cartoonish.
Well, I think this is something that...
And then he gets exploded with lasers or something.
This is one of the things that you kind of have to just accept in comic book movies is that there's always going to be, especially the Marvel movies. Marvel's very good at doing this, while DC is always like, our hero should remain kind of dark and, nebulous. No, there's always the hero's drive to be a hero.
Yeah.
The drive towards being a hero. A hero will always do the most heroic thing that they can, while a villain will always do the most villainous thing they can. There's a drive towards villainy and a drive towards heroism. That there's a major split in the movies. Like you are not supposed to empathize with the villain too much.
Sure. Yeah. And as Marvel's cinematic villains have continued in different movies, I mean, they're at the point now where they're just like alien robots that we can't empathize with anyway, and they're just clearly evil because they were designed in a CG program.
I mean, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here because I don't want to jump the timeline.
Yeah.
Captain America were literally fighting Nazis. So, so
the most all-purpose villain.
The most all-purpose villain, but they can't really show Nazis, so they're Hydra, which is
right.
Yeah. So we have Obadiah Stane goes up there, gives a few remarks, and blah blah blah. One of the things that they tell us is that Obadiah Stane was the person who kept Stark Industries alive after Tony's father Howard died early, and Tony was not old enough to take over the company. So Obadiah led it through different issues, including the creation of the arc reactor technology, which should also be called. It runs on MacGuffinism.
Exactly.
MacGuffinite, I think it is.
MacGuffinite.
MacGuffinite, which is they never explain what it does. They just say, "Oh, it's arc reactor technology. This is the future." Wait, what? Why is it the future? They explain this all in this 10-second montage with bad Photoshop, which is like it's funny because it's the type of Photoshop that I do. Like, whatever. But okay, so it turns out that Tony has to go to Arabistan to show off some new weapons and sell it to the military.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing, is that, Rhodey's trying to corral him into doing it. You get some glimpses of their relationship. They're very buddy-buddy, even though it's like they really shouldn't be, because it's like a military thing.
Mutual respect, I suppose.
Mutual respect while showing no respect for any women around them.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, there aren't that many in the movie that we have to deal with.
Oh, no. Of course, the first true female character we meet in the movie calls Tony out on his, they call you the Merchant of Death. Like, really? Who calls him that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the all-purpose, like, Huffington Post reporter or something.
Exactly. And the worst thing is that it's like, oh, you're the we don't have any sort of, like, thing that we can, maybe the most person that we can somewhat call that is like Dick Cheney. Like, like we would never, like, who runs Blackwater, Kevin? Who runs? You don't know.
I don't know.
No one could. No one
I have
knows
no idea.
this stuff. Yeah. I mean, like, I might feel that way about, the CEO of Comcast, but
no, and that's true. I mean, that kind of thing wouldn't be so public.
Yeah.
No matter how flamboyant and what kind of a celebrity that Tony Stark character is. People would be like, "Oh yeah, him. What does he do? I don't know. He runs a company of some sort."
Yeah. Who's Elon Musk? Tell me that. Who's Elon Musk? And you'd be like, "What? I think he has a spaceship."
I think he has a spaceship.
Yeah, but I mean that's kind of the whole point of it. But of course, he ends up sleeping with her,
Yeah,
and one of the weirdest sex scenes ever, because it's so obviously not the woman and Robert Downey Jr. having sex in that scene, because you never see their faces. It's just like, I'm like, I had to stop and look. I'm like, wait a second, that's not them at all. This was added in. And then the next scene, of course, is when they wake up in the morning and you meet Pepper Potts.
Yes.
Tony's girl Friday, as I like to call her. Which is that relationship they're trying for from the old My Girl Friday. Who was in that movie? Was that
That was I'm leaning towards Gregory Peck.
Yeah. But it's like those type of movies where it's like the girl is his sidekick who he's not having a relationship with.
I'm sure it's Cary Grant. Right? Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell.
Oh, okay.
Sheesh.
You should know that, of all people.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah. So they're in that type of relationship.
Gene Lockhart's also in that. Anyway.
Yeah, it's so she takes out the trash every once in a while escorting the female reporter.
She does all the things. She does everything that she needs to for him, because as we see, he's completely incapable of taking care of himself and any sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
He's he's basically an empty husk of a man, ready to be filled with a sense of
purpose,
loyalty and purpose and heroism
and direction
and drive that he will find in the darkest of places.
Speaking of
literally
which,
dark, a cave.
Speaking back to Arabistan at this point, after they fly, to Arabistan, and
lots of witty banter
on the
ensues.
plane and stripper plane, also called the Soul Plane, as I like to call it. He shows off. Tony shows off the new missile, the Jericho missile, which is just a bunch of little missiles inside of a big missile. It's a Matryoshka doll of missiles.
The next version of that will, of course, just be the little missiles exploding into many more missiles.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a Matryoshka doll of missiles. Which is he's got this whole thing rehearsed and everything, and everyone's all applauding like, oh yeah, more missiles, yeah.
Look, that missile's got a bunch of missiles. I like more missiles.
Yeah, he's showing off for General Fat White Guy, which is what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all he was missing was like a big cigar coming out of his mouth, or a pipe, so to speak. It's like a MacArthur portrait, come to life. But anyway, and that's where he's coming back, and it takes us back to the beginning where he's ambushed and taken to a cave.
Yes.
Where he meets Ho Yin Sen and has to build the Jericho missiles for these mysterious Arab terrorists who want to use the missiles for some. They have a lot of Stark technology as is. I don't know why they need the missile.
Yeah. Well, they just need that one. They need that one because it's the best.
Because it's cool.
Maybe it runs on arc reactor technology.
But of course, Tony Stark, when he wakes up, he finds that he's hooked up to a car battery, which created an electromagnetic.
He's got a thing in his chest.
He's got some shrapnel in his chest that are moving towards his vital organs. And this is very similar to the original Iron Man, except that in the original Iron Man, he has to wear the whole chest plate underneath his suit, not just the arc reactor in the center of his chest. One of my favorite things in that scene, though, is after he wakes up and he's like, what did you do to me? It cuts to another scene where they're by the fireplace, and then the guy starts explaining it. So it just goes to show that there was like a whole section that they cut out of him like asking the question, and then no one's saying anything until they move to the fireplace, and then he answers it. And I hate that in movies. I hate that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there was actually some scene there, and it was a very transparent, sort of awkward, jarring kind of cut where you were like, well, "Why? Wait, what?" But yeah, that's basically what it seems like.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like
I will answer you over there.
Yes, quick, let us move. Something like that. And he's like, "Okay, so I'm Tony. I know who you are.
You gonna answer my question?
Just give it a second." That he answers. Oh, I hate that in movies. I absolutely hate that. But yeah, he ends up explaining that it's the part of the we call them the Walking Dead. It takes like a week for the shrapnel to actually kill the person. Blah blah blah. Tony Stark, the Arab terrorists come and demand to make the Jericho missile. Tony Stark is like, okay. And then he uses the technology to build his own little arc reactor, and more importantly, he builds a big iron suit. Now, I don't know why he came up with that, but
well, he knew that he was going to have to fight his way out, and couldn't, so he made a bulletproof suit thing with a little face.
Yeah, exactly.
And little
missiles and machine guns. Yeah.
He just sort of did that.
Well,
I like that. I like that there's... So we actually see that the bad guy, Bob the terrorist, is watching him. There's video hooked up. And he knows there's at one point where he confronts him and he says, "You're not actually doing the thing." And he goes, "No, but I am kind of." And then he talks him into not killing the doctor.
Yeah.
And so he's, "Okay, well, you better build that missile." When it's clear that all the things he's building, none of them are missile shaped.
Yeah.
None of them.
Why does a missile need fingers?
Why did you make that weird face thing? Oh, that's a welding mask.
Yeah.
You used a welding mask to make that welding mask. This is a better one. I made a better one. Yeah, I know you're in a rush. I know, but I needed to take 5 hours to make this and make the eye holes and.
But so he, of course, makes his way out and escapes. But the doctor, Yinsen, he's like, no, you don't have enough time. I'm gonna go distract them. And he's like, if you just waited like literally 5 seconds, you could have made it out with me. And he gets gunned down.
It's okay. I'm dispensable. Which is basically exactly what he says to Tony Stark. No. I have no family. My family's already dead. No, I want to die. No, seriously. There's no further use for me in this film.
Yeah, it's like, trust me, my death will lead you to a better, more heroic path. So yeah, he dies, and Tony Stark fights his way out, uses his cool missiles and flamethrower and machine guns.
Rock music
playing. More dulcet tones of AC/DC. He uses his boost, jumps out into the desert, wanders off, and eventually is rescued somehow.
Sure.
Yeah.
He's rescued by his all-purpose buddy who's always there when he needs to be there.
There's actually a really great cutscene with in the movie where Rhodey keeps going out looking for Tony.
He's like, I tagged him.
Well, he keeps on like
I'm zeroing in on his signal.
The general is like, this is like the 4th time you've gone out to look for him. And he's like, I'll keep going out until I find him. And he's like, God bless you, soldier. It's something like that.
Then he strikes a woman.
Terrence Howard wife beating thing is very strange. He goes, they eventually gets rescued and he comes back to America. He demands a cheeseburger.
A changed man.
Demands a cheeseburger from Burger King. apparently the story behind that is that Robert Downey Jr. found himself eating a Burger King cheeseburger and realized that he had needed to change his life. That's literally the story behind it.
Really?
Yeah. When
Wow.
he was on drugs and all strung out and like going into people's
Burger
place.
King will will do that.
Yeah, he pulled a Margot Kidder and he was just running into people's houses. And he holds a press conference where he tells everyone that Stark Industries is no longer going to make weapons because he
Yeah.
saw all the Stark technology weapons at the terrorist
Yeah,
camp.
it's
and he's
being
like,
used for bad things, and he realized
as opposed
that
to the weapons being used for good.
violence is bad.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And of course, Obadiah Stane's like,
He's just kidding, guys. We're gonna keep doing that
Yeah,
because
it's like,
I gotta.
Tony, we're weapons dealers. We're ironmongers. Shove that in there. That worst line ever. Because I got to set up the fact that I'm gonna be a villain called Ironmonger. And Ironmonger's just a person who sells iron. I don't
Which
know
he never
why.
calls himself that. I didn't know that was
Yeah.
his name. I just thought it was like, I don't know. I didn't know he had his own super
I don't
villain
remember,
name.
I don't remember if they ever actually. I think that's the only time they actually say it in the movie. But I
Yeah.
know that in the comics that's his name.
Yeah,
Ironmonger.
so that's how they were working that in because there was no legitimate way for him to be like, call me Ironmonger now that I am this robot thing.
Yeah.
I want a name like you have a name.
Yeah, I'm
But he
the
hadn't been
Iron
called.
Man.
But he hadn't really been
Grr.
called Iron Man yet at that point. He was called Iron Man at the end of the movie.
Well, he's like, I want to be Iron Man. Ironmonger. Monger. There we go. That works. So he tells Tony.
Man.
He tells Tony to lay low while he gets everything sorted out.
Yeah.
They're like, why don't we focus on the arc reactor technology? And it doesn't work. And blah 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 goes through.
Like, but there's one in me. It
Yeah.
works fine. It's glowing.
Exactly. And so while laying low, Tony designs more fancier versions of the armor in a series of comedic scenes, so to
Fun
speak.
little montages and quips and talking to
robots.
an AI robot of some sort with an arm. That's very nice. It's very cute.
Yeah, I mean one of the things I really liked is that they had the fire extinguisher robot.
Yeah.
They did that.
Yeah.
They did that bit 3 times.
Yeah.
And it worked for
Yeah.
me. I was like,
It was funny.
yeah, I was like, this is something that's going to be. It shouldn't work, but it does, and I think it's that rule of 3. They did it 3 times, and they gave the robots, of course, human type, personification.
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
make a little sad
Yeah,
when he scolds it.
yeah.
The robot makes sad noises for some reason. Like,
Yeah.
why would that be programmed? I don't know.
Well, I mean, and here's the thing that bothers me at this point in the movie. Stain comes back from the board meeting and he's all upset and everything. Like, you really got to understand. I kind of sympathize with him at this point in the movie because I'm always like, Tony Stark is kind of being a little unreasonable. Like, it's like the CEO of Starbucks coming out and say, you know what? We're not making coffee anymore.
I've seen what coffee can do.
Yeah, pretty much. And the guy who's underneath him is like, but that's what our business plan is. It's selling coffee. I mean, I understand that, weapons, and he's a changed person. The weapons have shown him that do more harm than good, but
Yeah.
sure enough, it's just ridiculous what's going on there.
It would have been far easier for him to just be like, I'm going to resign because I don't want to be a part of this business, but I'm not going to take down an entire industry of people with me.
Yeah, exactly. Like all these people who are like working in the munitions factory are like,
Jesus Christ, am I going to have a job?
yeah. I mean, Stark gets a little kidnapped, and I got to give up my $50,000 a year job. I'm just stuffing bullets here, man. I actually probably Stark
I
Industries.
have a family.
Stark Industry probably pays pretty well, even on the low end jobs.
Could be.
Yeah, I mean they're not they're no Walmart. They're a legitimate Fortune 500 company. Yeah, but yeah, I sympathize with like everyone else because I think Tony's being a little like he can even go back and say like, you know what, let's focus on like non-lethal technologies or something like that. But no, he's like,
And
no,
drones. Well, they do mention drones a little bit, but that wasn't quite a thing yet.
No.
But yes. Protective technology, defensive
Yeah.
technology, fancy bulletproof things.
Yeah. And the rest of the movie is pretty much. I mean, you could sum up. There's the scenes where the terrorists from Arabistan find the old armor suit, and get it to
get it to Stain
Get it
so
to
that he
Stain.
can do
Build-
it and improve upon it and build his own thing.
Meanwhile, Tony Stark is flying the Iron Man, testing out the Iron Man suit, flying it around, flying it against jets.
Yeah.
You know, it's some really cool scenes. I mean,
He goes to take out some bad guys, some unfinished business.
the CG scenes look pretty good in that.
Yeah.
I mean, because he's confronted by that same reporter again, who's just like, do you know Stark? And you know this village? Yeah, I heard about it. The guy in the first act brought it up. I thought it was kind of weird that he mentioned that village by name, but it turns out, I guess it's kind of important.
And he's like, you sold them a bunch of things. He's like, I didn't sell them anything. And then he's like, I gotta go fly there in my iron suit and fight them.
Do you know the village of Chekhov's gun? Yeah, I've heard of that before. Not quite the same, but so yeah, he flies, and it's all just showing off the Iron Man suit at this point, and he's taking revenge for it. But then he finds out, of course, that there's a big conspiracy, and Obadiah Stane is secretly selling the weapons to the terrorists, and he paid them to kidnap Tony.
Yes.
Which is weird that they would do that before Tony Stark was even an issue. Like with Stane, that's how you know Stane is evil, because he wanted to take Tony out before Tony
Even
had this
before,
chain.
Yeah.
Which
when
I-
he was just being billionaire playboy Tony Stark.
Which was so weird, because it's like, he's just the billionaire. You could do whatever you want at this point. But no, that's how you know he's evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, Obadiah Stane, confronts Tony and steals his arc reactor so he can use it to power the Ironmonger suit, because they're like, we can't get it to work. And he's like, well, Tony Stark did it in a cave with a box of scraps. One of my favorite lines in that movie.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
With Jeff Bridges getting really angry and scary, and I'm just kind of like, hey, it's not really that scary.
That's good though too to bring up, because yes, we are sort of dismissing him as the billionaire playboy, but he's also a genius.
Yeah.
I mean, they make it a point to be like he can do complex mathematics in his head. He can build that thing out of scraps in a cave with a gun sometimes literally pointed at his head.
Yeah.
He works well under pressure. He's obviously very clearly built for this thing.
Yeah,
the point is that he's wasting his talents on this business, and that's part of where he's probably been a problem for a while.
It could very well be. There's probably a lot of backstory that we haven't seen. You know.
Now I'm projecting that on the movie, but I feel like it's implied in his character
Yeah,
that
I could see that. It's not anything out of the ordinary. And of course, the arc reactor. Oh, we missed this part, but when Stark gets back, he replaces his original arc reactor with a new one.
Oh, yes, and that was a great scene.
Oh, with him and Pepper?
Yes, it's a great scene from a one of the things that I did really like about this movie, you mentioned the CG is pretty good. There was also a lot of very cool old school like movie magic. Like, how did they do that?
It reaches into
There was some of that. There was her reaching into the chest and pulling out the thing, and I was looking closely at it. I'm sure there's a very easy way to explain how they did that, but on some level I was still sitting there just like, wow, like realizing like that's very cool. And the scenes where he was flying around and not the ones where he blasts off and it starts there's a moment where you're like, oh, that just became like
CG.
a sped up weird CG thing. But when he's actually gets it under control and he's at the 1% thrust and he's floating around, you're like, that's pretty cool. I appreciate that.
I could see you watching the movie just going, Kristen! Kristen, how are they doing this?
Look at that. They got the Iron Mans flying around there. What do you...
Kristen, she's reaching into his chest.
You can't even see the wires.
Yeah.
You can't even see the wires on him.
Yeah. But but he tells her to get rid of the original one, and she gets it framed to show proof that Tony Stark has a heart. It's a fun little thing.
Sweet.
But it's also one of those MacGuffins that
she
is going
gives
to
him-
come back later.
She gives him... Yes, exactly. It's Chekhov's arc reactor.
Yeah, and then which leads us to the third act of the movie, which I believe probably 75% of all Marvel movies have this problem in the third act. Especially Iron Man. All three Iron Man movies are exactly the same way, where in the third act of the movie, he's underpowered and has to punch things.
Yeah.
It's all three of them are exactly the same, and when we reach those in the podcast, it's going to be the same thing.
That's what it is. It's what you set up that the character is. He gets this power. He gets whatever. This is every Marvel movie. You get the power, and the power is clearly a superpower, literally a superpower.
Yeah.
And then, rather than just being like, I'm going to use this power, and I'm somewhat evenly matched, and it's just going to be me versus him. It's like, no, it's like you have to. They have to take him back down.
That's a special.
And then power back up. But you know why? Because it shows that the real power comes from within.
Yeah. It turns out we were the real monsters. I mean, it's the same problem like with the Star Trek movies, not the new ones, but the original Star Trek, the 6 movies of the original Star Trek series. At the end of every one, the Enterprise is severely underpowered, except for the last one in Star Trek 6 is the only time that the Enterprise is at full power, but by then it's an old age decrepit ship. I mean, one day we'll go over it when we do our Star Trek podcast, but it's the same thing. It's like, I want to see Iron Man like fully powered up and fighting this bad guy, this Ironmonger suit. And all it evolves into is just punching, just punch this and punch that.
Yeah.
And
it's always punching, and nobody ever really looks like they've been beat up. Nobody ever, because they're PG-13, there's no blood. Not that I want there to be blood. I'm fine with implied blood.
There will be blood, Kevin. There will be blood.
Paul Thomas Anderson's Iron Man. I drink your milkshake, Tony Stark. Anyway, I had to work that in.
Actually, we're gonna talk a little. I'll talk a little bit about production notes in a little bit, because we're just about done with the recap of the movie.
Well, that's pretty much it. Well, the biggest point, the one thing that we haven't mentioned that happens at the absolute very end is, of course, his. Not the very, very end, not after the credits, right before the credits.
We have to talk about that.
Is him admitting to the world that he is Iron Man taking ownership about that.
What's great is there's a through line throughout the entire movie of Agent Coulson from the Strategic Homeland, blah, 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 division.
Yeah.
Also known as S.H.I.E.L.D., trying to meet with Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Now, why he's trying to meet with him before he develops the Iron Man suit, I don't know. But it's funny because Coulson, I didn't realize that he had shown up that early in the Marvel Universe.
No. Yeah, it surprised me. I thought maybe he would have shown up after Nick Fury did so in the second, the second
Iron Man
movie.
2, I thought it was Iron Man 2 he showed up, but I saw him in the first movie. I was like, hey, that's Coulson. That's kind of cool to go back and see Coulson there. But yeah, he's there and, trying to get him to... so they give him this thing about like when Iron Man is fighting, Ironmonger at the end. They're like to give him what happened after the arc reactor blows up and it looks like the end of Ghostbusters. Coulson is
a sign, all right.
Yeah,
Stark Industries is going out of business.
Oh man,
quoting other movies.
Anthony Potts would have been an amazing Pepper Potts. There's a bit we're going to do at the end.
You're going to be late for your plane.
I pay myself well.
She
would have been really good.
I don't want to put my fingers in your chest hole.
Exactly.
No, I don't wanna.
Why does she always sound like Janine? She's not necessarily from New York. But I mean, it is almost the same character. But the end, he's given a cover story and he just blows it off and says, "You know what? I am Iron Man." And it's a very cool scene too.
Sure.
And then of course,
it's a cool scene because it also, for someone like me who's only I've seen comic book movies before. It's always about the secret identity.
Yeah.
So it's great. It was very refreshing. I mean, the whole movie is very refreshing for someone like me who's really only ever seen like two kinds of comic book movies up to that point, which was, campy as balls or super dark and gritty and good and fun up to that point. This is Dark Knight, I don't think was out. Did this movie come out? It was the same year,
it was
2008.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I don't remember which one came out first. I want to say that this came out first because I think Dark Knight came out in July.
Okay.
I don't know.
That sounds right. I feel like
I think this was May or
tentpole
June.
movie.
Yeah.
And they would not have wanted it to go up against each other. Which
No,
is fine.
I think Iron Man actually came out earlier in the spring because I think it was around the time that I had gotten married. I think it was that week or two. Well, around that time when I had gotten married.
I, on behalf of your wife, anyway, am glad that you're not trying to remember when you got married in the reverse. Like, I think I got married in the spring because I know I saw Iron Man that weekend.
Pretty much.
Glad you're bucking convention there, stereotype.
Bucking the Joe convention.
But it was a very refreshing movie from that. I mean, that's a very big deal in movies. That's something that Marvel, that's consistent then with Marvel, because there's no real secret. It's not that there's a secret in like Metropolis or Gotham City in those movies or in those universes.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of knows that those characters exist. And then they do that a little bit with the Spider-Man. You know, everybody knows New York's got the Spider-Man. You know, in those in the Sam Raimi
Spider-Man,
movies.
New York's behind you.
You mess with him, you mess with all of us.
One day we'll have to do Spider-Man.
Oh, God damn it. So, but that's what's interesting is by the time you get to the Avengers, they're doing a little bit of meta commentary on like there are Avengers things now. There's action figures and there's the kinds of things that exist in our world, which is normally something I kind of hate, but at least they're winking at that in a way that's fun and acknowledging of like what might that be like in a fun way if these characters existed. So they were brought our world suddenly has sort of these kinds of characters in them, and it's like with Captain America, it's like I mean we've seen him 100 times in the movie without the mask on. I mean he puts the mask on almost as an afterthought. It's more representative. He doesn't need to have the mask on. Yeah, and it's the same thing. And then Thor is just Thor. Thor is just Thor. There's no alternate ideas. No like no, my name is Bob Norwegerson. I work at the cracker factory. You know, there's none of that. It's like
Southern Cracker.
Oh no, there's trouble. Better get my hammer.
You better get my Thor on.
Like,
we'll get.
I don't know where I'm going with this.
Trust me, we'll get to Thor soon enough. But yeah, it's very true. So it starts it off. It's that Iron Man is literally going, "No, I am Iron Man," and everyone goes nuts. They're like, "Blah!"
Yeah, they'll jump up and start screaming.
And then, of course, after all the credits roll, then all of a sudden, Samuel L. Jackson, head of S.H.I.E.L.D., shows up.
Sure.
As Nick Fury.
Yeah.
Little bit of a trivia on that one. Nick Fury in the comics was, of course, a white guy. Oh. But in the Marvel Ultimates universe, which was a universe that was created in the 90s or early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, the creator of the Ultimates book, which was the Avengers, actually purposely designed Nick Fury to look like Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, okay.
So Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury actually existed before Samuel L. Jackson ever played Nick Fury. It's weird to think about it that way, but that's the way it was designed around. And I think it was brilliant casting.
Sure.
For that.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's a lot of fun.
And then he's like, I want to tell you about the Avengers Initiative.
Yeah. You think you're the only superhero?
Well, technically he was for a very, but aside from that.
Yeah. You're entering, and that's where it starts to get. So one of the things that I noticed is, even in retrospect, for me watching this movie, I never and this is I think just because it's the first one, but even knowing where Marvel's kind of going with this now, like you don't really get the sense that up until that moment that this is the start of what it is. You get the sense, sure, that there's going to be more Iron Man movies because it's so fun and you know how successful it's going to be.
Yeah.
As we were watching it in 2008, you're like, this movie's going to be big. We're going to see him again.
The year was 2008,
and he had signed.
My flashback music.
It's always, regardless of what
Semi-Charmed Life.
10 years later than that, but up until that moment when he literally says you're stepping into like a larger universe. He actually says? I wrote down what he says. He actually says you are entering into a much larger universe. A Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It's like he's telling you, the viewer, you are stepping into a larger universe.
Exactly, and of course that's exactly what's happening.
You gotta think that's kind of clever.
Sure, and that was fine, and that's what I'm saying. Like up until that point, you're just enjoying the movie, and then now knowing
now
and
it's a
seeing that now it's your entire freaking life, and Marvel has decided how you will be spending like 5 weekends a year.
You know, if they at that time, if they were all as good as Iron Man was, I would be very happy with that. Now, unfortunately, our next 2 movies are The Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2, so we'll get to talk about those. But Incredible Hulk is not that.
Never underestimate Tony Stark.
I don't want to give this that much away, but a couple things before we get into feelings on other things. I wanted to give a little bit of background information on the production of this movie. It was originally optioned in 1990 by Universal Studios, so Iron Man had been in production for 28 years at that point. Was it 18 years at that point? For 18 years at that point, it was originally supposed to be directed by Stuart Gordon, the guy who directed Reanimator and wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Well,
yeah. Some people who were up for the role in the 90s was Nick Cage, which would have been amazing, and Tom Cruise, who I could honestly see playing the part.
Sure.
Very much so. Honestly,
I could still see him playing the part.
Yeah. Completely. I don't know why he hasn't played a Marvel character as is yet.
Yeah.
He'd be up on top of that. There was a plan after 1996, before the movie got made. 20th Century Fox got the rights. Now 20th Century Fox, of course, ended up making X-Men. They had the rights to X-Men. They had a bunch of rights at that point. Almost every comic book rights were being bought up by 20th Century Fox at that point, and they actually let the rights lapse to New Line in 1999 or 2000, around that time, because they just had too many. It says when I was doing my research that Quentin Tarantino was approached to direct, but he was probably approached to direct like, "Hey, Quentin, you want to direct Iron Man?" And he was like, "No," and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the 2001 they tried to get Joss Whedon to direct it. Then finally in 2004, which was the closest that it had gotten made to that point, Nick Cassavetes was directing it.
Oh.
The guy who directed The Notebook and Alpha Dog, amongst other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had a lot of crazy scripts going around. One of them, and I thought this was interesting, I made a note of it, was that the script had Iron Man fighting his father, Howard Stark, also in an Iron Man suit, which is nearly identical to the end of the original Hulk movie from Ang Lee, where Hulk fought his father, who was also another Hulk at that time, which I thought was really stupid. And I was like, I'm glad they didn't go that direction again.
Yeah.
And then finally in 2004, when Cassavetes fell through, the rights reverted back to Marvel. And Marvel actually went through Paramount for distribution rights. So Paramount distributed it, because this was before Marvel was their own company and before Disney bought Marvel.
Yeah.
This is that weird sweet spot in between with Paramount. Paramount still makes money off Iron Man. But the original director that they had in mind before Jon Favreau was Len Wiseman, the guy who directed Underworld, so that Kate Beckinsale would have played Pepper Potts at that point.
Yeah.
But then they hired Jon Favreau, and I always thought that Favreau was an amazing pick for this. It ended up being amazing, but I always thought it was because they originally wanted to get what's-his-face to play Tony Stark. Vince Vaughn to play Tony Stark, which I could see.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony Stark with a potbelly can be done.
Sure. Was that ever talked about?
Not that I in any of my research, but I always just kind of
assumed.
Just your
theory.
Yeah, my theory, my fan theory. But apparently, Favreau had worked with Marvel producer Avi Arad during Daredevil, where Jon Favreau had played Foggy Nelson to Ben Affleck's really crybaby Daredevil character. Movie's still not as bad as people think it is.
No.
It has its bad.
I'll take your word for that. I don't know if I saw that one.
It's not.
I might have missed that one.
It's not great by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pretty decent for what it was.
Yeah.
Favreau said he approached the movie like an independent film, like as if Robert Altman had directed Superman, which I know you think would be amazing.
Sure. I suppose.
And Favreau, his approach to Tony Stark was like Elon Musk, which is very similar to what Stan Lee did with the approach as Howard Hughes, but without the pea in the jar and the long fingernails. The spruce goose. Everything I know about Howard Hughes is from an episode of The Simpsons. And The Aviator.
I was going to say The Aviator.
So those are just some of the production notes. Of course, the first person to actually sign on to the movie was Terrence Howard as Rhodey, and that actually led to some future problems, which we'll probably go into in Iron Man 2.
Yeah. So when, if you're planning to get to this, but I'm trying to rush you.
I'm done with my production notes right now. Yeah.
My question, because I did no research on this aspect of it whatsoever, but when was it kind of, since this, I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. At what point were they like, did Marvel decide that this was the first of the next, 20 years of what they're going to do? I mean, when was this called? It's easy to call this phase one now, but was this considered phase one where it's like, we're going to do these 3 films right now?
Well, originally, I know that during when they announced the Iron Man movie, they had announced a series of movies Marvel was going to do.
Well, because Hulk came out like later that year.
It was they were almost simultaneously in production. Iron Man, Hulk, and Ant-Man were the first ones.
Oh, okay, right.
So all the way back to 2005, 2006,
okay,
Ant-Man was in production. It's only coming out later this year.
Yeah.
So, 8 years after it was announced, it's coming out now. But that's when they were going to do their first. I don't know how. I knew they were going to go for the Avengers eventually, and they were. I know Thor and Captain America were in pre-production at that point, but I don't know how. I think after the success of Avengers, they were like, okay, we're taking this whole hog at this point.
Was it that recently?
I think it. I mean,
because I feel like with all of the,
you got to remember, Iron Man came out in 2008. That was only 6 years ago.
Well, no, I know, but that's why it feels like. To me now, it feels like this whole. It's hard to remember, honestly, a time where it wasn't just like, there's gonna be 8 Marvel movies a year, for the rest of our lives.
Only 2.
I just, and this is sort of
with me. I don't necessarily hate the concept. What I do hate when it comes to the automatic sequels is when the second and third movie are like parts 1 and 2 of one movie, like what they did with Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. Oh, I hate that too.
I don't like that.
I don't like watching half a movie.
However, with Captain America and Thor, what they've already done, and Iron Man, the second movie and the third movie are usually 2 separate stories with the character.
Yes.
Which I like.
I do agree with that. As long
as they stop it at 3. I'm okay with it. And I think that's where they're doing like a George Washington bowing out after 2 terms as president thing. It's like, unofficially, there's not going to be more than 3.
Yeah, I mean, the inherent sort of problem with that is 3 is, of course, it's a thing for a reason. The 3, the 3-act structure and the 3 to make it into a trilogy.
Yeah,
but it's not really the Iron Man trilogy. It's just 6 hours of Iron Man. Yeah, really. I mean, it's 3 different adventures. 6 hours or 8 hours or so, whatever it adds up to.
And I think that's where it gets
Tony Stark
into a little bit of the meta commentary in that of how these movies are truly like comic books. They're like a self-contained arc contained into one movie, and then it's just 3 separate arcs for the character over time. But getting back to Iron Man, finishing up what we're talking about, because we're well over an hour right now. We're over an hour right now, so it's fine. But the casting, what do you think of the casting?
I thought the cast was great. I thought everybody was fine in the movie. Issues with Terrence Howard aside, as a person. Not even as a person, but he's just kind of a boring act. He doesn't look like he's ever enjoying himself. No. I mean, he's literally on a plane with strippers. Well, he gives off a creep vibe because he's kind of a creep. So it is what it is. But he, I mean, obviously, Robert Downey Jr. is great. You said it before. He makes the role. He makes the movie.
He does. I have a feeling that if he wasn't cast in that movie would be nowhere near as I don't even think Marvel, the cinematic universe, may have even taken off as it did without him being behind it.
Yeah.
And like I think the guy from Coldplay's wife is really good, or ex-wife. Gwyneth Paltrow, she does an incredible job.
She's fine. Yeah, she doesn't have to do much.
She's even like attractive. Like I find her attractive in that movie, and I do not find Gwyneth Paltrow attractive at all.
Well, it's the red hair. It's the reddish hair.
Redheads don't do anything for me. I find her.
Well, for me, Jeff Bridges was great.
I still think he
for
was
the most part. He was a little too
nice,
cartoonish in that broad, just a big broad, like I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
But he had to be. Yeah. He had to do that for the character.
Yeah, I think that the Marvel movies. Let's not jump the timeline. We'll talk about Iron Man right now.
Yes.
I think he wasn't villainy enough. I think they could have gotten a better.
You don't think he was villainy? Oh, okay. But you're saying Jeff Bridges, the actor.
The character,
okay.
Yes.
The character was very overly excessive.
In the hands of a person who's a good villain. Like I always say, my favorite villain of all time is Jason Isaacs.
In The Patriot.
Yeah. Like he is so evil that you love him being that evil.
Yeah.
And like you need someone like that. The character needs to be someone who's evil for the sake of evil. Like he needs to raise the glass and be like, gentlemen, to evil.
Well, and that's where I disagree, I guess. I disagree from I agree in one sense and I disagree in another sense. I agree with that in the sense of if you're going to make these movies and these movies are doubling down on, and they are up to this point, they are. The bad guys, and you said it very eloquently, that the heroes have to be heroes and the bad guys have to be bad guys, because these are not the kind of complex moral, the heroes, the anti-heroes that we have today. And I think that's why it's so refreshing.
Yeah.
Where I disagree is just and this is my issue with comic book movies in general, is they don't make for very interesting stories for me. They're not terribly compelling in the sense of like, what'd you think about that? What do you think about what he decided to do? No, because his motivations are either, are you a bad guy? Good, then you're going to make me a bad guy and do a bad guy thing.
I think that's something
you're watching a live action cartoon. And if you're okay with that, and I am in some sense, fine. You're going to have fun. That's going to be it. But
I think
some ambiguity is nice. Yeah. It makes it richer, and that's just more of what I look for in a story.
I think you're right in that. I think that there isn't a lot of nuance with performance.
No.
But I think what you could see though,
Iron Man is not a subtle movie.
No. But I think
it is robots punching each other.
But what you could see in that movie, in the Iron Man movie, is you could see it's more about performance than anything. So if you give an actor an opportunity to shine in that role, to choose scenery, it would be much more interesting, I think, than just than like Jeff Bridges tries to give a little bit of a subtle performance. He tries to not reveal that he's the villain.
Yeah.
While he's doing the part, and it doesn't come across as I feel a little bad for him at the end, because I'm like, he was just doing what he needed to do. There's people's jobs on the line.
And then, of course, he goes whole hog into like, no, I'm in a robot suit.
Yeah.
I'm going to say some puns, kind of.
Let's kill the dinosaurs, the Ice Age. Kind of like Schwarzenegger in Batman Forever, which we all malign.
Batman and Robin,
sorry.
Yeah.
Which we all malign because it's so ridiculous.
It's terrible, yeah.
But I mean, like, you could take that ridiculousness and kind of, tone it back. But I mean, it's all about performance. Yeah. It's not about...
Well, Marvel has been remarkably consistent, and I do agree that I would rather watch a live-action cartoon of a Marvel movie than just angsty Man of Steel, which I hated way worse than you did, way more than you did, but you didn't really like it either. Yeah. So
I had a lot of issues with the script in that one.
I hated that movie. Anyway, but they're doubling down. DC is doubling down on brooding, dark, grime, PG-13 grime, which never really works. If you're gonna go dark, you have to go dark. There's no other. You can't pull your punches on that.
No.
But Marvel doesn't pull their punches. Their movies they end with 15 minutes of good guys punching bad guys and bad guys punching good guys, and nobody gets a bruised or broken bone and anything like that, and they all look great.
So let me ask you, what do you think about Favreau's directing? Now, this is a guy who, up to this point, the biggest movie he had directed was Elf.
Yeah, he's not really. It's hard, I don't have a real strong sense at this point of like I couldn't really speak to what the Favreau style is. I mean, he's certainly not. He doesn't have enough, I think, films under his belt, enough consistency, I think, under his belt. But what I did like was because the script is fairly thin. The story is fairly thin. I mean, it's we described it. I mean, it's fine, but it's a live action cartoon. He did a good job knowing when we got to get a quick boring bit out of the way, and then now we're gonna say some one-liners and some jokes and some silliness.
I think what he did with, like, you could see a lot of influence of Swingers and Maid in the movie as well. Mm-hmm. Like that ability to just sit, focus on two guys talking, and show the inherent humor and the development of character in just two people talking.
Yeah, very easy to follow. He didn't bog it down with a lot of like Iron Man's got to do that. He just said we're going to tell this story with this guy, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think especially with what's her face, even with the scenes with Pepper Potts where he's sitting there talking with her, scenes, it just the most compelling scenes in the movie were just two people talking.
Yeah,
and it's not like exposition. It was like, no, the characters are learning about each other, and you know, like he already knows, or telling the audience something about the characters through the way that they interact, which I thought was really cool that Favreau did that, and I think that's the Favreau style.
It was an origin story that was built out. It wasn't an origin story where it was an hour and a half of nothing, you know, or 70 minutes of nothing happening, and then 30 minutes of I'm an Iron Man now.
Punch.
He's some version of Iron Man very early on, and the movie is about how does it get from this, there not being an Iron Man, what are the steps that he goes through to now he's Iron Man officially at the end, and he literally announces it at the end of the movie. Yeah. I am Iron Man now. This is what I'm going to do. So it was a full-length origin story, but
it didn't feel like
it
when we were
like
used
it
to.
At all, where Batman Begins is he doesn't even resemble Batman until, which is a movie I really like, until an hour into that movie.
And even then, I'm like, he's not really Batman. Michael Caine's more like Batman than Batman is. Batman doesn't cry about Rachel.
Another thing I liked about the CG that helps keep it a little bit, there's some broad daylight CG, which still holds up fine, but the big robot battle takes place at night. From a distance, not a lot of close-ups. It's like, great, let's keep it that way.
No, but the stuff that
that's
happened,
how you preserve that stuff.
The stuff that happened in the light, though, looked really good.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised by that. The only other thing that I thought was kind of a little weird with the movie, and I thought directing-wise, or it might have been either directing or script-wise, but I just felt like the relationship between Tony and Pepper just felt so forced.
Yeah, it was. There was no will they or won't they. It's they will and when and how they're going to do it. And
but
here it is. There was a sense of obligation.
Yeah, but I think the acting of Gwyneth Paltrow and the acting of Robert Downey Jr. really helped that out.
Yeah,
so that it didn't feel like so automatic.
It was they want to.
Yeah,
get together. It's clear that. Yeah, they're not ready for it or whatever, and so yeah, I agree. Forced.
It felt like it probably shouldn't have been this movie. They could have shown some hints of it, kind of like they did.
Sure.
But it was just like, it was very heavy-handed. And I felt like this is something that needs to develop a little more organically.
I know. It's what they got it, it's the stereotypes. Like, this is going to be for the girlfriends.
I guess,
and the wives. And it's like, no, they can enjoy the punching robots, too.
I would have more preferred it if it was more subtle.
It's going to be a better movie that way, then do it.
Well, I mean, because it completely skips over, other things. I mean, there's a very long cut scene in a scene that was cut from the movie of Tony Stark throwing this big party and like, trying to have, sex with two women.
Sure, and I was just thinking that like he sleeps with one woman in
Yeah.
the movie.
Oh,
It's implied that
that-
he's a womanizer, or a playboy, but we only saw him sleep with one woman.
And let me tell you, that scene, I'm glad it was cut. It was awful. It made no sense. It didn't.
Yeah.
It would have completely thrown off the flow of the movie.
Sure.
And it did add a little something to it, but I just, once again, I feel like the
A lot
Pepper
of times
character.
they get cut for a reason,
Yeah.
mostly.
The Pepper character and I would have much preferred to have been like coming out of the movie, my wife going, they're going to end up together. I'm like, oh, how you know? You could just tell. I mean, like, I would have preferred that than
Sure.
kind of how it's a little heavily handed.
Kind of
on
like,
that,
we're
yeah.
going to get together as soon as you grow up a little bit and I learn to work less. And it's like,
Yeah.
just, okay.
As soon as I divorced Chris Martin. I don't know why I always harp on that. When I
Yeah.
just see her, I see Coldplay. So we've kind of covered a lot on this. Is there any other specific parts that you kind of wanted to talk about with the movie?
No, I mean, all of the stuff that I wrote down, we talked about along the way. So
Yeah.
I feel like I did the movie justice. I think it's a better comic book movie than it is just a movie.
Yeah.
But it's a fun movie.
I
and-
honestly think it's one of the best comic book movies out there.
yeah,
I mean,
agree.
like in the timeline of the time, since up to 2008, it is one of the best interpretations of a comic book I've ever seen on screen. And I'm a big guy. I'm a big comic book fan. I love comic books, and you got to think like before that, even like going back and looking at '89's Batman, that wasn't a very good interpretation of Batman.
yeah, it was its own movie.
Yeah, and even Batman Begins was good, but once again, as I said, Michael Caine was,
It was
more
a very
Batman.
specific
Yeah.
comic book, I think, that they were doing.
Yeah, and like maybe the 1978 Superman, maybe with that. By the way, I saw a great audition film of Superman where they showed all the women auditioning for Lois Lane. Leslie Ann Warren should, according to that audition, if you just watch it, you'll see it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
That's besides the point.
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with the heart of steel.
As Iron Man, all jets ablaze, he's fight and slight with repulsor rays. Amazing armor,
Yes, Iron Man.
a blazing bomber.
Yes, Iron Man.
We're gonna stick to the timeline, so I don't really want to talk like when we talk about Incredible Hulk next week. I don't want to talk too much about Thor and Captain America and Avengers.
Yeah.
So
It's hard not to, though, because
Yeah.
that's part of the whole
yeah. So we're gonna
origin of this.
We're gonna talk about this in terms of the timeline. So we're gonna watch Hulk as if we've only watched Hulk and Captain
Okay.
and Iron Man, and then Thor will include Thor,
Yeah.
Hulk. We could talk
All
about
right.
that in progression from
So
there.
we'll try to be better about that.
Yeah. So
And I'll
the
try not to curse so much.
yes
So
the
darn much.
Dagnabbit. So our final thing,
Fiddlesticks.
our final little bit we're gonna do is it's a what if. Marvel Comics is known for their what ifs. It's kind of like what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic
Yeah.
Four.
Alternate universe
Alternate
stuff.
universe stuff. And our alternate universe today is going to be what if Iron Man was filmed. When did I say 1970s?
Yeah, I chose 1974. I think we just said 70s or mid 70s, so I just said it in 1974.
Okay, so hold on a second. Let me.
So
let
the
me pull up my
idea
list.
was not, yeah. So so we can take turns with the casting, and the director and all of that. We can take turns. We may or may not have come up with this similar kinds of things.
I'm
but
almost positive we came up with the exact same cast.
I don't know. We'll see. But so the idea was the idea is that if Marvel, not so much that they were going to make all of these different movies, but just if an Iron Man movie, what would an Iron Man movie in the
and this
70s?
is like the same type of thing. So we'd have Iron
let's-
Man, Pepper Potts. We'd probably have Rhodey.
So let's start with the just the plot, the because I don't have much to say about it because I think the plot would be exactly the same.
Maybe take place in Vietnam.
I was going
or
to say the bad guys would be Russians
Oh,
because
yeah,
I'm thinking if it's
or
the mid 70s,
Vietnamese. Yeah, maybe it's mid.
you know what? Because 1974, it's a touchy. We're
Yeah.
getting into the Cold War. They're all-purpose bad guys at that. We're in the Cold War at
Yeah.
this point. It's easy enough to just. Specter of communism is still right there. So I feel like I started to think about well, what would the plot of the movie? It would be the exact same
plot.
movie. It would
Yeah.
just be they would be Russian instead of Arabistanian.
for Rabistanian. Yeah. So who is your cast for Tony Stark? Who do you got?
For Tony Stark, aka Iron Man.
Yeah.
I went with Paul Newman.
Paul Newman, really?
Yeah.
You know, I went a little campier than you.
Okay.
I went with Burt Reynolds.
Nice. My other...
And my whole casting on Iron Man is based on facial hair. So
Sure. Okay.
So it was
Paul
either
Newman wouldn't really have much of that.
it was
facial
either
hair, I
him
don't
or
think.
Donald Sutherland, but I ended up going with Burt Reynolds.
My other alternative, my other idea was Bruce Dern.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Who kind of looks a little bit like he could be the part. He did Great Gatsby that year, and that was a big role for him. And when you see him in that movie, you're like, yeah, he looks a little like Tony Stark.
Yeah, where he does it.
But I thought it would be a much more fun movie to watch, and it was a little bit more in the spirit of casting Robert Downey Jr. to cast someone who was so recognizable. Little different because he was still kind of at the top of his game, more or less. I mean, he was kind of starting to decline at that point in terms of popularity and box office draw. But
Yeah.
I mean, that was a year after The Sting, so I mean, he was still kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, like, and to be honest, most of my cast for this movie is based off of Smokey and the Bandit. I'm not gonna lie.
We're a few years away from Smokey and the Bandit. It was 77, I think.
Maybe. Let me just check really quick because I know I had that.
Yeah, late 70s. So
Yeah,
we don't have so it's fine. This is pre-Smokey.
Yeah,
Burt
1977.
Reynolds.
So I but I mean, like, you went 74. I mean, I didn't necessarily go with a specific
That's fine.
70. I just said 70s.
I used
but-
74 because I wanted to make sure that it could have happened.
Oh, okay.
I was very
needed to ground
focused
yourself.
on. I needed to ground myself in the actual year so that I could be like, what did people look like in that year? Who looked the part, rather than just who I might have hypothetically wanted to be.
Oh, well, yeah. I still
in
went
the
with
part.
who would look the part in the 70s, but
Well, that
Yeah.
was part of it. Yeah, who would look it, but it wasn't necessarily who would look like the movie looks now.
yeah, I mean, like,
Just what would the movie have looked
seriously,
like? then?
I just went with Pepper Potts. I went Sally Field. Director, I went with Hal Needham.
I considered Sally Field, and I thought she would actually be very good. I was thinking Sally Field
Because
for Pepper Potts.
she's very girl next door, which is what Pepper Potts is supposed to be. She's not
Sure.
supposed to be a knockout.
I did consider Sally Field, and I almost wrote her down.
You went with Sissy Spacek, didn't you?
Well, no, because I little young. I went with little young.
Really?
I think
guess.
so. I don't know how old she was, but I felt like she needed to look like you needed that banter.
Oh,
and
I guess
so,
Sissy Spacek was in Carrie in '76, so she would have been
that's
like
why I'm saying
18.
she's
She
a
would
little
have been
young.
16 at that time. Well, she
But,
probably would have been 18. But
I originally went with Faye Dunaway, who was again at the top of her game. But once I cast Paul Newman, I realized I had to cast Joanne Newman, his actual wife and frequent co-star. You'd get that chemistry, and it would be a lot more fun to watch on screen, I think.
but that's why I kind of
So I went a little real world.
yeah, you did. Like, I went with I think the part of the thing with Sally Field, though, is this is kind of why it just drew me into it, was that I think Sally Field would have been an amazing just because of Burt Reynolds and Sally Field, like watching Smokey and the Bandit, like
Yeah.
how there's like zero sexual chemistry between them, but that's still so believable
Yeah.
at the same time.
I'm with you. I think that would be a good
yeah.
cast. That would be good. And you said what? Hal Needham?
Hal Needham would be Hal Needham.
Hal Needham.
Yeah, he would definitely be the director.
I considered.
Wait till you hear my Obadiah Stane. You'll love it.
I'm excited. For director, I considered two possibilities. I considered Marvel, who, if they're recognizing that if this succeeds and this is going to be a thing, and they want to give someone who would understand the content but was still kind of a young director who they saw potential in the genre, you could go with, if this is 1974, pre-Star Wars George Lucas.
Ooh.
American Graffiti's out at this point, or this is the same year as American Graffiti, roughly. I think that might have been 73. So right off that, they might have been like, this guy's got a good ensemble.
I think THX would have been a much better.
Sure, and that would have
Yeah.
been out. Well, I don't know if that was released or not.
Well, it wouldn't have
maybe
been, but I mean,
it
people
was
would
his
have
first film.
People
but-
would have known about it at least if they.
So
yeah,
that would have been interesting, and what would that have meant for a lot of different things? Or you go the other 1970s American film, gritty, anti-Hollywood. Go Bob Raffleson.
Ooh.
Post Monkeys, King of Marvin Gardens. That's what got me onto Bruce Dern, because that had just come out as well.
Bruce Dern.
Yeah.
I'm Bruce Dern.
So either way, it really depends on the movie. I mean, if we go Paul Newman, then yeah, I'm going to say Raffleson.
I didn't pick someone for Rhodey but I did pick the guy who'd play Happy Hogan, the guy that Jon Favreau played. And since it's Burt Reynolds, who do you have to play Happy Hogan? Dom DeLuise.
Yeah. I didn't cast him because I don't even think I noticed him in the movie.
For the end of for the credit sequence for Iron Man would have been amazing. Where he's like, yeah, I am Iron Man. Just just laughing throughout the entire
Starts
thing.
choking on a meatball sub.
But okay, so Obadiah Stane was the only one I went with who wasn't in the Cannonball Run series. I went with Orson Welles.
Oh, nice. That's good. Yes.
I figure in the 70s, it's fat Orson Welles.
Yeah.
It's very overly dramatic Orson Welles, and seeing Orson Welles in the Ironmonger suit.
Oh my God.
To see him deliver
I don't even want to say who I said because that's so much better.
the line, he built it in a cave out of a box of scraps. Hearing him say that, Orson Welles say that, would have been just like, it would have shattered theaters.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. I give it to you.
Who'd you pick?
I thought it would be a lot of fun to ham it up with an aged Laurence Olivier.
Ooh.
Yeah. Just want to see him. So we went respected veteran thespians.
I think, now that I'm thinking about it with the Cannonball Run thing and Smokey and the Bandit, I may go with Paul Williams as Rhodey Rhodes.
So I did say with James with Rhodes, what was interesting about trying to cast a black movie actor, like a notable actor at that time, was a lot of the ones that I wanted were, and again I was being grounded in reality or forcing myself to be, were on television, which was a much. You weren't
two
gonna
separate
see,
universes.
Like, what was the name of the guy? His name escaped me. The guy from the Rockford Files.
Oh God, yeah, I don't know.
I forgot his name off. Originally I had thought about him, but it was like, well, how would you get him kind of to transition to that? So I thought, well, if you want someone good, if you can get him, you could get a Sidney Poitier.
That's what I was thinking. But
or
that just seems like so racist to say, though, because it's like how many like African American actors in the 1970s
I felt like that
were there?
too,
Yeah.
and I felt really bad writing him down. So I also wrote down Billy D. Williams, because that would be fun to watch.
74, he was young. He was hip.
This is way pre
pre-Empire.
Pre-Empire.
Yeah. Empire was
Few
1980s,
years
so
before,
6
yeah.
years.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what he was doing in the. He might be doing TV work at that time.
The only person, did you cast the only other person I cast was an Agent Coulson, because I knew he was such a character.
That would be Paul Williams for me. Would be Coulson.
Okay.
So like really creepy Paul Williams, Phantom of the.
I only thought of
Little Enos.
one person, and I wrote it in bold. Everyone else I wrote question marks after with just regular text. I only thought of one person, wrote it in bold, would have etched it in stone if I could, and that's Harvey Keitel.
Excuse me, you have an opportunity for me to tell you about the Strategic Homeland Intervention, blah, blah, blah.
It's an acronym. SHIELD. Do you get it?
Would you like to see my butt?
He has to do that at some point. Scrunch his face up.
Back then,
Iron Man.
What was Harvey Keitel doing in the early 70s?
Well, it's after Mean Streets.
Is it after Mean Streets?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mean Streets was 73, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say this was after Mean Streets. 72 maybe. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
I don't even think he had done Bad Lieutenant yet at that point. I'm not sure when that came out.
No, that was. But you know what? Billy D. Williams at the time had just done Lady Sings the Blues, so I will give it to you because that was done in 72. I'm just looking that up, and he had Mahogany was 75.
Ooh.
So
yeah.
And Brian's Song was 71. So maybe James Caan would have made a great Agent Coulson.
Yeah.
James Caan.
I remember specifically looking at the cast of The Godfather and just being like, who
can I
would
pick?
be in this movie? And I'm like, they were just all too old and Godfathery. I just couldn't.
So I mean, before we actually end, let's give Iron Man a rating based upon does it hold up as a movie?
Oh, sure. I think so.
I think
absolutely.
It surprised the hell out of me. I thought for sure I'd go back and watch it and be like, this is not like in comparison. Like I'm jumping the timeline, but in comparison to some like Captain America, Captain America 2, The Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought there's no way this movie's going to hold up, and it held up.
Yeah.
Like way more than I thought it was going to.
It's a lot of fun. It's not bogged down by all the stuff that we are talking about that we're trying not to talk about that, we'll eventually get to.
Well, yeah,
it's not bogged down by that, and that'll, I think, be an interesting thing to look at next time
with the Incredible Hulk,
because that should be the same, but will it be? I don't know.
Will it? Won't it?
Time will tell.
So it does hold up, and I'd give it. For me, if I had to give it a star rating, I always do out of 10 stars because I hate it when everyone does. I do it out of 5 stars. And they go, I give it 3.5 stars. Well, that's just 7 stars. I actually,
okay.
It bugs me. It bugs the hell out of me. Like, why do you got to go with 5 stars? Just go with the 10 point scale decimal system.
Go 100, and then you're go 100 stars, and then you're giving it a grade almost. You're giving it out of 100. Give it 1,000,000 stars, Joe. My God.
Now you're just being
it's
ridiculous.
Full of stars. Different movie.
I'd give Iron Man 8 out of 10. I think it holds up. I think there are a few things that like the MySpace reference and the phone.
Yeah.
You know, it's like those are things that date it.
Sure. But that's fine.
Yeah. But even then, it's like I think the
So
script
we're not allowed to say half stars?
not on a 10-point scale.
All right, fine.
So like I think the script is tight. I think the directing is good. I think all of the acting is really good, with the exception of Terrence Howard as Rhodey. But aside from that, you know.
Then I'm gonna give it 7, only because I do think at the end of the day it's a bit thin. Which is okay for the movie that it is, but it keeps it from being, because there's really, beyond what you see on the screen, there's no pretext, there's no subtext, there's no anything, there's just
text.
Iron Man flying around, punching stuff, and it's fun to watch, but at the end of the day, that's about it. But as far as what the movie sets out to accomplish, I think it mostly succeeds.
Cool. All right. Well, go to planetarbitrary.com for all your Planet Arbitrary needs. You can follow me on Twitter at Planet Arbitrary. You can follow Kevin at KWhiteSays with an S. Like our Facebook page, Planet Arbitrary, and listen to our other Planet Arbitrary podcasts, Pat's Retro Video Game Review Podcast, a.k.a. Play On, and Game Classy. Play On is all about video games. Game Classy is all about tabletop games. So hopefully we're going to record these and then release them, you know, simultaneously, not simultaneously, but
on
release
holidays,
them
on major holidays.
On major holidays. So hopefully next week will be Incredible Hulk, and then the week after that we'll do Iron Man 2. And then we may take a break off and then, you know, keep going from there. We may do some other movies in between, you know. But until next time when we watch The Incredible Hulk, Kevin, do you have some final words?
No, but I want to say I'm very impressed that we were able to make this podcast in a cave out of scraps.